What are some of the differences in driving in New Zealand and the Philippines?
Well, there's a lot of differences when it comes to driving here in New Zealand and in the Philippines. For example, number one, we don't normally use seat belts in the Philippines, and here in New Zealand they are very strict when it comes to the seat belt. If the police catch you not wearing the seat belt, then they're gonna fine you for $150 for that. Number two, in the Philippines, we're not using the car seat for our children, but here they're also very, very strict when it comes to the car seat. And then number three, the main difference is the road, of course. We keep left here, but in the Philippines, we keep on the right side of the road. So those were some. And one more thing, I believe we don't have roundabouts in the Philippines, but here we do have a lot of roundabouts. So instead of traffic light, they have roundabouts here. So those were the main differences.
Is the system of going round a rotonda or a roundabout in New Zealand and the Philippines similar?
Well, most likely yes, but in Rotonda, I believe it's only one lane and it's only four exits, and we don't actually do the indicator there or signaling. However, here in New Zealand, there are a lot of roundabouts here wherein there is like five or six exits or four, and there are not just single lane but multi lanes. So the main problem for that is, where am I going to position my car? What is my indicator before I enter the roundabout? What is my indicator before exiting the roundabout? So something like that.
Are you allowed to use cell phones for finding routes or talking in the Philippines? And how about here in New Zealand?
Well, in the Philippines, I think they can still use their phone because they're not that strict. And however, if you're going to compare that here in New Zealand, they're very strict in using your phone or talking. You can actually use your phone, but you should have a phone holder, and but you're not allowed to talk. If, for example, the police catch you using your phone while you're driving, there's a fine of $150 for that, and a demerit points of 20 points. Yeah, that's the demerit. And you can only, your demerit points will go back to zero only after 2 years.
Is drinking and driving the same here in New Zealand and in the Philippines?
Oh, I think there's a big difference when it comes to drink driving. In the Philippines, maybe there is a law but not that strict. And while here in New Zealand, they're very strict when it comes to like alcohol level that you take, and it depends how old are you. When if the police catch you, there's a big fine for that, and there's also a demerit. So please don't drink while driving, and that saves a lot of lives actually. So please don't do so.
Well, how would you compare learning to drive in the Philippines and learning to drive here in New Zealand?
Oh, there's a big difference when it comes to driving here in New Zealand as compared to the Philippines. I started driving in the Philippines when I was young, and even those who doesn't have a license can drive, and there's no rules, so nowhere to go. It's fine. However, they're very strict. You must at least 16 years old, and then you have your learner license, and then you should follow the rules. You are not allowed to drive without a supervisor if you're holding a learner license only, and then you need to take for a practical exam so that you can go for the next level, which is the restricted license. And then after that, even if you have a restricted license, you're not allowed to drive from 10:01 p.m. up to 4:59 a.m. You're not allowed to drive without the supervisor. And then once you pass the restricted, you're gonna go for another test, which is a full license, and that's the time you're going to have an independence in your driving. So that's it. So that's the main difference.